would never have considered myself to be an environmentalist. I didn't think of myself as an activist. I wasn't particularly educated about issues around climate change. A lot of that information was really new to me up until about 4 or 5 years ago. When I moved to Ottawa, I wanted to do some volunteering, and I got in touch with the Peace and Environment Resource Centre, and I started volunteering there, and that, I think, became a really important time for me, because it was while I was there that I started becoming a lot more educated around issues of climate change, resource depletion, water issues. I had this idea that I would make a New Year's resolution for 2008, that I wouldn't buy anything new for 1 year. And that became my project. So nothing new for 1 year, with food being the obvious exceptions and basic toiletries. If there was something that I felt that I wanted or needed, I had to source it alternatively, and that slowed me down. You know, oftentimes I would have to wait before I acquired it. And something really interesting happened in that waiting period. Sometimes I realized that I didn't need it as much as I thought I did. And so I could do without. Or I would figure out a way to make it myself, or somehow meet that need with something that I already had. I thought things were starting to shift when I started volunteering at the Peace and Environment Resource Centre, but that year literally turned everything upside down for me, and my life changed completely. It was during that year that I realized that I'm crazy about plants. That wild, edible and medicinal plants is something that I really want to devote the rest of my life to. I never saw that coming. I never expected that at all. I thought that that year would just be that year, and the project would be fun and it would be interesting, and I would have this accomplishment that I could say that I did and that I had learned some stuff. And I didn't realize that it would lead me onto this path where suddenly I find that I have more of a sense of meaning and purpose to my life than I ever did before. I ended up needing to go to the emergency room for a minor medical problem, but it was urgent, and it was in the middle of the night. And I don't own a car, so the buses had stopped running. I needed to take a taxi to get there, and so I was there and admitted, and I got a prescription for antibiotics, which I needed to start taking right away. So I then had to take a taxi to the nearest 24-hour drugstore, pick up those antibiotics, and then take a taxi all the way home. And that basically took up the whole night. But it was in that whole process that I realized how dependent the healthcare system is on fossil fuels. How much energy and resources does it take to go into running a hospital? There are petroleum-based products in antibiotics. It just really became clear to me that that whole system all the way down the line is very, very dependent on cheap fossil fuels. And that's one of the key things that got me started learning about medicinal plants, because I realized that there are medicinal plants that could address what was happening with me at that time. So I wanted to learn more about that, and I wanted to be able to kind of have that alternative, that knowledge, that understanding, to not just use that as a backup, you know, in case systems fell apart, but to start incorporating that into my life so that right now I don't have to be dependent on those resources. I started a year-long apprenticeship with an herbalist in the area and started reading and learning everything I can. And again, that was another experience that was really, really empowering for me. Empowering in a very significant way, because now suddenly I was able to take care of many of my healthcare needs with my own resources, with my own knowledge, with plants that literally grow outside my door. Once I started learning about plants and recognizing plants and being able to identify them, I was just blown away by how literally everywhere I went, there was a plant that had some history of an edible or medicinal use. If you put your thumb on either side of it, it will split, and inside you'll see that silk or the milkweed white that later in the season will get really fluffy and these seeds will turn brown and they'll fly away. But when it's young and immature like this, before the seeds turn color, and if you squeeze it, it should even be kind of juicy. You should see or feel some fluid coming out. It's actually really quite sweet and tasty. And this is the only part of the plant that you can eat raw. From the dandelions growing up out of the sidewalk to lamb's quarters, which is, you know, a delicious substitute for spinach, which grows everywhere around me. I could pretty much, I think, get dropped anywhere in the city and I wouldn't have to take more than, I don't know, 10, 20 steps before I came across a plant that I could identify and understand some of its uses, either for food or as medicine. All of a sudden, what used to be just this unidentifiable wall of green now started to stand out, and I was able to see the different plants and understand them and know that we are surrounded by this amazing abundance that most people just walk by every single day. And so it really became important for me to understand the immediate local landscape that I inhabit, what's growing right around me, what's growing in my city, what's growing in my bioregion, and how I can be a good steward to those spaces. I really like sharing what I know with other people. I think it's really important to share that information. I think it's our birthright. I mean, we evolved with wild plants as part of our diet, as part of our medicine. I love seeing that transformation in people when they start to be able to recognize things in the environment. And I love seeing that connection get reestablished. One of my favorite foragers, Samuel Thayer, he's said that when people eat from their environment, they want to protect that environment. And I think that's a really important shift that happens when people literally start plucking food from the park that they live next to. It's even more tangible than eating locally. There's something even more immediate when you recognize that there's a dandelion and you know that the leaves can be eaten in a number of ways, and that you can do this with the flowers and you can do that with the roots. Again, it kind of brings you back to that sense of empowerment, and I like helping people come to that understanding.